Hey, Tariq the Sheeeeiitt, shut the fuck up, because you guys was not kings, and ancient Egyptians were not black, says genetics. With help from my boy Email Shong, let's get through this, people. The racial makeup of Egypt's ancient rulers has long been the subject of speculation. The first ever genetic analysis of mummies performed by the Max Planck Institute throws a wrench in the black Egyptian hypothesis, made popular by Afrocentric academics who claim that the kings of Egypt were black. Well, they claim all of them were black. But the thing is, as we know, the Nubians were black, the Egyptians were not. But if anyone doesn't know what the black Egyptian hypothesis is, it's kind of like what Email Chong just said, only it's part of the whole thing about how everything ever created was black. You know, technology, science, literature, it's all black. The Afrocentric academics like to preach. Well, really all they're doing is trying to steal other people's history to take it as their own because they're racists. It's identitarian politics, we all know that. Tariq Nasheed, shut the fuck up. The research published in Nature Communications shows that Egyptian pharaohs were closely related to West Asians than Africans, with strong genetic links to Neolithic Levantine, Anatolian European populations. Does that mean they were filthy whiteys? Oh boy, oh goy. Well, this is quite controversial now, isn't it, guys? But it gets even worse for the kings. The study found that modern Egyptians share more ancestry with sub-Saharan Africans than the ancient Egyptians, or the modern ones. Those of Arab descent, of those who arrived during the initial Muslim invasions, are far more closely related, due to varying factors that we'll get into, to black people than the ancient ones were. Not doing so well, and I'll publish the link to Nature Communications study in the sources below so you guys can read it as I have. An international team of researchers sampled 151 mummies from the archaeological site of Abu Sir el-Malek along the Nile River in Middle Egypt. Middle Egypt is obviously the middle bit, but in case you guys need to know, Upper Egypt is actually the lower bit of Egypt, and Lower Egypt is actually it's vice versa, because Upper Egypt means it's hilly and Lower Egypt means it's flatland. It's basically the riverbeds and stuff like that. It's where the river ends, just so you want to know, people. The mummified Egyptians who lived between 1400 BC to 400 AD provided a rich source of genetic material for scientists to study. They were able to pass the data that they gathered to test previous hypotheses and studies from modern DNA and release their findings. The genetics of the Abu Sir el-Malek community did not undergo any major shifts during the 1300-year time span we studied, suggesting that the population remained genetically relatively unaffected by foreign conquest and rule, said Max Planck Institute's Wolfgang Haas in the press release. The data shows that modern Egyptians share 8% more ancestry with sub-Saharan Africans than Egyptians. This suggests that an increase in sub-Saharan African gene flow into Egypt occurred within the last 1500 years, explained Stefan Schiffels, also of the Max Planck Institute. So what they're basically talking about is, because of slavery, because of the trade, the fact that travel became easier, mainly because somewhere along those years, I could be wrong, the camel was domesticated, which allowed people to essentially travel across desert and not have to do it on foot or with horses who aren't really cut out for the desert, at least the Sahara Desert. And so the movement of people, the trading of people, the trading between other kingdoms and cultures introduced that gene flow steadily after 400 AD, as you would expect. The scientists cited mobility down the Nile River, increased long-distance trade between sub-Saharan Africa and Egypt, and the rise of the trans-Saharan slave trade, which essentially is the more Arab thing that they did. Not necessarily the Europeans, which is West African, in case you want to know. Interesting that, eh, guys? And the slave trade that began around 1300 years ago has reasons, as I've already mentioned. Given the migration of the regional populations in the past 1,000 years, it's no surprise that the genetic makeup of modern Egyptians differ from those who lived in the region thousands of years ago. The groundbreaking study is further evidence that disproves Afrocentric claims that the Nile Valley's ancient population would be considered African in a modern context. And even Nubians don't look like what you would consider African, or at least what these Afrocentrics would describe, because they're all mostly related to the West Africans, who look completely different to East Africans. I mean, look at a Somalian, look at an Eritrean or Ethiopian, who are similar peoples but different ethnicities. Look at the whole of the Eastern Africa. They look different. Why? Because they themselves, much like the Arabs to the north and the Algerians and all these other different people, the Bedouins, the Berbers, they all have that ancestry of Romans, ancient Egyptians, people like that. That's why they look different. That's why their hair is different. There are some Nubians with straight hair, naturally straight hair, blue eyes, green eyes, red hair even, although some of that is dyed. That explains everything, doesn't it, people? But let's continue. And as previously shown, Algerian actress Sofia Boutella was previously accused of looking too white, even though she's an Arab, for her role as Egyptian Queen Amenet. Oh, she could be part French, you never know. Critics of the film demanded she be replaced by a darker skinned actress because Egyptians were black people, not Arabs. Well, they weren't either, they were Egyptian. With the release of the new study, both Boutella and the studio can rest easy, knowing the casting decision fell on the right side of history. Well, sort of. Ethnicity is wrong, but they're not here anymore. Well, the closest we can get to the actual ancient Egyptians is the Coptic Christians of Egypt. They aren't Arab. Maybe most of them aren't. They're about as close as you can get. And of course, the Nubians themselves, who weren't Egyptian, but they're related to them by blood, and the fact that they used to also rule over Egypt for about a century or two before it went back to the ancient Egyptian rule, because Egypt has been conquered and has conquered other people. It has a very long history, but that pretty much pays all the dividends that we've been saying for God knows how long. All those historians and the archaeologists who've had to battle these Afrocentrists, these black nationalists, these racists. I'm glad that it's vindicated us, because now we can definitely say, because the genome's been mapped, these people have been studied, their mitochondrial DNA has been recovered, that they're not black, they're Egyptian. They're just brown people. They are as they depicted themselves to be in their hieroglyphs. And what's going to happen here? Well, they'll just double down, won't they? Tariq and all those other people, they'll just say that it's just propaganda, that the genetics is a lie, that the science is a lie. It's just, you can imagine all the things that they'll say. But we have science to back it up. Hashtag shut the fuck up, Tariq.